us this afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started as people continue to roll in. Just so you know, we are recording today's webinar and it will be available after today on our Milk Quality Improvement Program YouTube channel. So we'll get that link sent out to everybody after we've wrapped up today. So welcome again. Today is the third and last in our series on dairy foods innovation at Cornell. For those of you who missed our first two sessions that have happened over the last several months, the first one was on Cornell support at the dairy farm and how dairy foods innovation begins at the farm. The second was on the research happening on dairy food innovation in the Department of Food Science at Cornell. Those two you can find already on our YouTube channel. And this is the third and the last, as I said. And our focus today is on the resources for dairy foods companies for innovation here at Cornell. And we're going to get started with Rob Rallier. He's the manager of the Food Processing Development Laboratory in the Department of Food Science. So I'm going to let him go ahead and get started.
All right, let's get, there we go. This is my first time on Zoom. I wish. I was asked to talk for about 15 to 20 minutes on what we do in what we call our pilot plant, or FPDL, which stands for our Food Processing and Development Laboratory. So I am going to skip through some slides. If there are any questions, feel free to interrupt me, or you can, I'll ask for questions at the end, but if it's in the middle of a slide and you have something burning in your mind, I'd be more than happy to be interrupted and answer your question. So what are we? Well, we are a New York State licensed and inspected dairy plant. We have a Part 2 license within that's issued to us by the state of New York. We do have a high temperature short time pasteurizer with a standard or extended hold. Our extended hold is about 12 minutes in length, and we can vary that. Oops, hit the wrong button already. We can vary that by the speed of our pump. So we can actually slow it down to 10 minutes. We could slow it down to 4 minutes. We could do a lot of different things with the extended hold. We have a vat pasteurized, 2 vat pasteurizers. One is a 50-gallon and one is a 100-gallon vat pasteurizer. We also have a Microthermix UHT unit that is indirect steam only. But if we take a project that wants to do direct steam, we could take it to Geneva. They have a dual purpose Microthermix unit. We do have a couple of small batch ice cream freezers. We have a 6-quart and a 5-gallon. Our fermentation capacity is anywhere from 25 gallons on the low end to 500 gallons on our high end. That's our largest fermentation tank that we have. We have the ability to do spray drying with a Nairo spray dryer. We have the ability to do freeze drying on a relatively small scale. It's not the smallest freeze dryer I've ever seen, but it's not the largest either. It's a Vertus freeze dryer. We do have an evaporator. It's also relatively small for product development type runs. We have all kinds of coolers, freezers, and a blast freezer. And we have some environmental rooms that can go from anywhere to 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And 3 of those rooms actually have humidity controls as well. And as you can see off to the right side of the slide, we do sign confidentiality agreements with all of our clients. So we are limited in what we would ever be able to divulge or publicize. Some of the work that we do is actually research, so it does get publicized, but that's not what we would do in terms of product development for a company. So let's talk about product development for cheese. What can we do? Well, we can do recipe development. We have close connections with our culture houses in the United States and in Europe. We have experience with many different varieties, as what you see there is a Swiss wheel. Everything we have in our plant is basically plug and play. So in all scenarios, we can modify make procedures and change things around because all of our equipment is basically mobile. And so we can set up different scenarios. What have we done so far? Well, we've done a lot of cheddar work. As a matter of fact, we make the cheddar for Cornell on campus. We've done low salt cheddar. We've done Swiss, Havarti, Gouda, Munster, Camembert, Brie, Cottage. We've done some cream cheese work. So we've kind of run the gamut in some of the different styles of cheeses that we've actually worked with companies with. And here are some pictures. We go anywhere from a 5-can vat or 50-gallon vat, which is that double O down there in the right corner. We have a 300 Kuzel, which is the upper right corner. And then we have a 500-gallon Qualtech that you see there on the left-hand side. Accompanying equipment that we have as well would include a Qualtech curd mill. We have a mozzarella stretcher, which you see up there on the right upper corner. It's not very big. We could do about 50 to 100 pounds of mozzarella in a sitting. Then we have a cheese press down on the bottom left, Qualtech. And as you can see on the shelving there, we have all kinds of different types of cheese molds to do anything from large 60 to 80 pound molds all the way down to the small camembert molds that you see, or the soft cheese molds there in the middle on towards the left of that photo. So some of the hard style cheeses that we do in the large vat, we can do some washed rind cheeses. We can do washed curd cheeses. We can do regular salted cheeses, all kinds of stuff in our open cheese vats. We can do soft styles, as I've already alluded to, in terms of camemberts, the bries, those types of things as well. Some success stories. About 6 years ago, we started with Murray's Cheese and Old Chatham Sheep Herding Company. They came to us and said, we want to develop a cloth-bound cheddar that's going to be aged around a year. It started out as Ezra, and then there was some consternation over the name as being associated with Ezra Cornell. So then it became Stocking Hall Cloth-Bound Aged Cheddar, which the first time we entered in 2019 won the Best in Show at the American Cheese Society. First time a New York State cheese has ever won that honor. We also have an Incubator Accelerator Program. This is a group of ladies that was started a company called Community Cheese Company. And as you can see, they were about 2 years in when they started winning some awards for some of their cheeses that they were making in our pilot plant. And currently we have Miranda Cheese Company. They are an incubator company out of Waterloo, New York. They are starting to move into their new plant that they've got. They recently purchased in about the next 3 to 4 months. They started with us about 1.5 years ago and have built their customer base. They've developed their cheese. They've developed marketing. They've developed good recipes. And now they're prepared to move out, hire some more people, and do it on their own. So let's talk about product development for fermented dairy products. This would be other than cheese. What we can do are, again, recipe development, working with culture houses. We have experience with different solids contents in terms of yogurt production, for example, and Greek yogurt. We're the only university currently in the country with an active Greek yogurt separator. We can have a 4 and 6 ounce plastic cup filler that puts on a foil lid. We also currently have a glass jar filler that also puts on a foil lid. We've done a lot of work with savory yogurts, drinkable yogurts, cork, low-fat Greek and Greek savory yogurts, and cup set yogurts with many different companies over the years. And here's a success story. This company actually is in Dryden, New York. We helped them develop their line of drinkable Indian yogurt drinks, and they're flourishing as well in the big city of Dryden, not too far from Louise's house. And we're working with a new company right now. It's called Cloud9. They're developing a savory yogurt. They're based in New York City, and we've worked with them, and they're just now starting to get to the point where they're going to start to develop enough product to send it out to consumer testing. We've dialed the recipe in, and they're very happy with it. So it's going to start to explode here pretty soon. And as I mentioned, we have fermentation tanks that go anywhere from 50 to 500, anywhere in between. That's the 50 on the left and the 500 tank on the right. We can do fermentations. They're both jacketed, so we can do fermentations at just about any temperature below steam temperature. But if you're going to do a fermentation, it's going to have to be well below steam temperature. Normally, we're in the 100 to 110 range, which is easy for us to do. That's the picture of our Greek yogurt separator with the hat off. It spins at 8,000 RPM. We can do about 5 gallons per minute at its max speed. So it's designed. It's the smallest Greek yogurt separator that they make that I know of out there, and so it's not designed for mass production. It's really designed more for product development. And then on the right side, you see our modern packaging filler with most of it taken off the top, but that's our 4 and 6 ounce cup filler right there. And this is just a screenshot of our KNA3 Greek yogurt separator. It's manufactured by GEA. We've had it for about 6 years now. It gets its work out quite frequently, and it's all pretty much completely automated. And what can we do for ice cream? Everybody loves ice cream, including me. We all scream for it. As I mentioned, we have some batch freezers. This is our Emery Thompson. This is the let me see the tray. This is the 5 gallon ice cream freezer, batch freezer. We have a 6-quart batch freezer as well. And every year, the Food Science 1101 course comes in and they have an ice cream competition. They break off into groups. They have to come up with a theme and a marketing strategy. They have to develop a flavor and an ice cream and all the ingredients. Then they come into the plant, they make it, and then there's a contest, and it's very prestigious if you win. And with that, I will take any questions anybody might have about our pilot plan. We do allow companies to come in. You can bring your people in, or you can have us do projects for you. We can use your ingredients, or we can source ingredients. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Very flexible.
If you have a question for Rob, go ahead and unmute yourself or put it into the chat. And while folks are thinking about that, Rob, I wonder if you can explain more about the Incubator Program, and if someone was interested in doing that, what's the timeline? What are the what are the requirements for folks who want to participate in that program?
So the Incubator Program is designed for small companies that want to start a dairy processing company that doesn't really have the leverage or plant or the financial capital to put a plant together, because dairy equipment is obviously very expensive, as most of us all know. So what we have is an incubator program where they come in for, they sign a contract for a period of time, at least a year, and then they come in and they use our equipment with our supervision. So they're basically using our plant license to make their products under. They can start to because we're a licensed facility, they can use those for sale. And then they can start to build their market. They can start to tweak their recipes. They can get input from us to help them, focus on certain things in terms of science, in terms of how their product may be reacting and what they might need to do to fix a particular defect that they might have. So over the period of time, generally 12 to 18 to 24 months, they're building their customer base. They're getting their name out there. They're developing product and they're developing volume so that they can develop the capital to actually try to move out into a plant somewhere. So it's really focused on small companies in New York that are trying to, to make that next leap into having their own dairy company. It appears as if I've explained it extremely well.
You did such an exceptional job explaining that.
Right.
I actually have a follow-up question.
Fire away.
First of all, does anybody have any questions on that before I ask my follow-up question?
Usual question I get is, are you really for real? And I say no.
I think we have a question, Rob.
All right, Avinash has a question.
Thank you so much. About this incubator program, is there a cost associated, and like what is the selection process, and how we can apply? I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I do have a small company. We make some specialized desserts from, those are yogurt based, fruit flavored. I did attend one of the courses at Cornell about a year and a half back, advanced chemistry in fermented product, dairy product. So it was very innovative. It was very helpful. So I thought this would be also a great help for my company. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Well, generally, our incubator program is really looking at New York companies.
Okay.
That's not to say that companies outside of New York would be excluded. The problem you're going to run into is the companies that are doing the incubator program are generally supplying their own labor. So they're doing the work with our supervision in our plant. In your particular case, I'm not sure what you're looking for. Are you looking for product development? We can do that working with the company specifically in terms of developing a specific product with you instead of, if you already have a company, you really don't need to be in the incubator program, right?
Oh, yeah, I actually have developed a product kind of thing. I'm looking into the scaling up kind of operation, getting some automation to my product. And I think that's where I thought anywhere this could be helpful.
So are you looking for more of a without dragging this on, maybe what we need to do is just have Avinash send me an email.
Sure.
About what you're really looking for, and then I can figure out how best to help you specifically.
Great.
Okay.
Thank
you.
So
my email is rdr10@cornell.edu, and I think Louise can put it in the chat while we're talking.
Sure, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Rob.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. That way we don't drag everybody else down.
Right.
All right. Any other questions?
So I did have one more question, Rob. Part one of the question is, do you have students who work in the FPDL with you, like undergraduate or graduate students? And then if a company was interested in engaging with those students and sort of incorporating the idea of both using the FPDL as well as having involvement in students, how would they go about that? You mentioned the ice cream competition. And so obviously some of our students are getting into the plant and starting to develop some different flavors. What would you suggest for a company who wanted to engage with some of our students through the FPDL?
Well, the student engagement is a little bit trickier when it comes to product development with the company because they're not actually signing any kind of confidentiality agreement. However, the pilot plant is actually used for both teaching, or not both, but teaching, research, and extension activities. We actually do have students in the plant every semester so that they can learn about good manufacturing practices, about plant policies, about getting real life experience of being in an actual dairy plant, a functioning dairy plant. And we use those students for a lot of different things, but if a company really wanted to engage specifically with a grad student, for example, on a product development issue, that would be best left to their advisor, generally speaking, but we would definitely support that. But if a company, let's say, had a student that they were interested in working on a project, then we could probably work something out in terms of confidentiality if that's the way they wanted to go. They would just have to sign it as well. So students are actually very highly encouraged to come to the plant and work, actually.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions for Rob before we move on? I think Rob does have to jump off, but Louise put his email address into the chat box. So if at any point you have questions for Rob, or you want to get more information on the food processing development laboratory, go ahead and reach right out to him. We also have a page on our website, on our Cornell food science website, that has some the basic information on the food processing development laboratory as well.
Right, and it has also my contact information there. So if anybody has any questions about what we can do for them, then they can feel free to reach out to me.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rob. We appreciate your time.
You betcha.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. We're just a couple of minutes ahead of schedule at this point, but that's okay. Our next speaker is Alina Stellick, and she is here. She's the manager of the Cornell Sensory Evaluation Center, and I'll let her introduce herself to you and talk about the Sensory Evaluation Center. Thanks, Alina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alina Stellick, and I run Sensory Evaluation Center here at Cornell. I've been here for about 6 years now. I guess it's my 6th year. Before that, I'm actually a Cornell grad. I have a master's degree from Cornell, and my undergraduate is from Oregon State. After my graduation from Cornell, I went into the industry, and I worked in large CPG companies like Unilever and Avon and Gillette, mostly in non-food products. But once I returned back to Cornell, it's all about food here. And I've done a lot of work with different companies over the years, different product categories. And I am very heavily involved in dairy sensory evaluation here. So I hope that everybody can see my screen at this point. Great. What we're going to talk about is sort of sensory evaluation and consumer product testings and how you can apply it to the dairy foods specifically. So the topics that I'm going to cover is what exactly is sensory science, some of the key principles of sensory evaluation, what kind of methods are out there, and services that are offered to our industry partners for a fee. So what is sensory? So, really we are, as humans, we experience the world through our 5 senses, seeing, hearing, the sense of touch, the smell and the taste. And most in food, all of these senses are very important, specifically smell and taste, that if you combine those two, you get the flavor perception. And that's what we are primarily focused here in food. But seeing and hearing, the product, if you crunch your yogurt, for example, that's also that auditory stimulus is important, as well as the touch. So sense of temperature and texture of different products also important. So what is sensory evaluation? It's a scientific method. And it's designed, it's used to evoke, measure, analyze, and interpret the responses to product as perceived by the humans through their senses. So evoke alludes to the need for specific guidelines and evaluation of products under controlled conditions. And that is done to minimize potential biases and get to the true perception of what the products are actually delivering. Measurement and analysis, it's a quantitative science. We heavily rely on data and statistical relationships to tell you what would be the differences in perception. And we interpret results in context, because no product or objective, test objective is a standalone question. There's always some background information that can change the how results of the test are read. So as sensory scientists, we always work with product developers and other people in organization in order to provide the most relevant information. Why would you do sensory testing in the business setting? Essentially, sensory is needed. It's because it helps in strategic decision making, and it helps to reduce the risk and uncertainty. A good sensory test can minimize the errors in measurement and errors in conclusion and decisions. So if you have a large amount of product that you're trying to sell and there's something wrong with it, without a sensory test, you may not know that, and it really would affect your bottom line. So it's really important. Where is this business risk coming from? It really comes from two sources: humans as the consumers of your products. They're highly variable. We have our different likes and dislikes. Some of us have sweet tooth and others don't like sweet things. So, some of us like certain kinds of food and others don't. So we need to understand the end customer. At the same time, products are also, especially dairy products, they're highly variable as well. It's easier, it's depending on the time of year, where the milk was produced, what cows ate, where they were located, those cows, were they happy cows, sad cows, the cheese that would be made from that milk, or that, the yogurt that would be made from that milk would have a different taste. So because of those two sources, you have to do sensory. And where does sensory typically fit into the business? In the large organization, sensory usually straddles several different departments. So we function usually as partners to R&D and marketing, and also manufacturing through QC and quality assurance. And the data that we produce definitely influences the sales and the bottom line of the business. Now, to introduce some of the kind of sensory methods and how a business person could use sensory, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what types of studies that we do. And we always start with the study objective. So always when the clients come to me and ask me, I want to run a sensory test, I always ask them, what is the study objective? What is it that you're trying to find out? Because that will help me inform what kind of sensory method would be the most useful for my client. And with that, there are several important factors that we need to figure out when designing a sensory test. What is the study population? Who is going to test your product? Is it somebody that is very familiar with the product? Is it an expert who is looking to find a very specific defect, for example? Or is it just a regular consumer, who likes your yogurt, or who likes your ice cream, particular flavor? And with that comes, do they have a level of familiarity with the test procedure? Are they trained or untrained? Are they very good at identifying, what's the level of their sensory acuity? Are they very sensitive people, or sort of a casual kind of untrained person? What about the test samples? So what are the test samples? What is the nature of the products? Are they mild or more stronger tasting? How many products are you looking to evaluate in a sitting? Are they presented blind or branded? Because any information that you present to the consumer or the panelist about the product will have an influence on how that product will be judged. The ballot or questionnaire, what kind of questions are you looking to ask? And can your study participants reasonably accurately answer those questions? So because, sometimes if you are asking, what is the temperature in the room, that question is more suitable for a thermometer rather than the human. The human can tell you whether something is cold or hot, but the thermometer, if you look at it, would be able to tell you the exact temperature in the room. And also, what are you looking to do with the data? Do you have somebody who is able to interpret the data for you and analyze the data yourself, or are you looking for us to do the interpretation and put the findings in context that's most relevant for you? As far as the sensory methods, there's three main quantitative kind of buckets for sensory methods, and I will give you an example of each. So the first one is discrimination testing, and it's an analytical type of test where you're interested in difference between the products. So the gold standard there is the triangle test, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. The next one is descriptive task. It's also an analytical type of test where you're interested in how products are different, not just whether they're different or not, but in what way they're different. And in that case, there's many descriptive methods like QDA, sensory spectrum, etc. And then there's effective testing where, and this is where it might get a little confusing, but that's where most people, they think of Pepsi versus Coke challenge, and they think, which one is more preferred, or which one is the most liked, or how do you like this product? So that's a hedonic type of test where you're interested in liking. And there's a whole bunch of qualitative methods that we also use, but the main three are the discrimination, descriptive, and effective testing. So example of discrimination test or difference test. So let's say you have two products and you're trying to figure out if the two products are the same or different. And in this case, the situation might arise if you are switching suppliers, let's say, if you have one supplier, giving you, a ingredient X for this price, and then another supplier comes back and says this is cheaper, but it's equally good. How do you know that it's equally good? So is there a difference between the two products? So you do a triangle test. And what is a triangle test? You give a person 3 samples of a product and you ask them which of these 3 samples is a different one. The catch here is that 2 samples that you give to the panelists are exactly the same. You just label them with different numbers. And one of them is a different one. So they need to figure out which one is a different one. So in Sensory, we like games to play, and this is one of the games that we play. And so what happens? So let's say I give one panelist these 3 samples, and they ask me which one is a different one, and they check this one was a red circle. Then the next panelist comes in, and I give them the same samples in the same order, but it's a different panelist, and this panelist tells me that this particular sample in the red circle 895 is a different one. So who is right here? We don't know yet, right? So the third person comes in and we give them samples now in a different order. So we mix things up. And again, the sample in the red circle, they say that it's a different one. So we have out of three of these panelists, twice 940 sample was picked out. That's a different one. And once as 895 was a different one. So the key here is the 940 sample is the correct answer. That was a different sample among these 3 that were presented. So let's say out of if we did it 25 times with 25 different people and 10 people picked the correct samples as different correctly, what we can say is that people probably, in general, if we repeat it many, many times, would not be able to tell the difference between the test and control sample. So if this was a ingredient supplier substitution and you wanted to switch to a new supplier, we would say the business risk to switch is low. Go ahead, save your money and go with a cheaper supplier. But if we, let's say 17 out of 25 people picked the different sample correctly, then we would say that according to statistics, there would be a potential difference in the way that, and so people would be able to tell that there's a difference between test and control. And therefore, if you want to maintain your brand identity and the quality of your product, you should stick to the original supplier. The business risk is high for you to do the substitution. So that's kind of an overview of the discrimination test. With a descriptive panel, let's say you are entering a new category and you're trying to understand in what way the products that are out there, how different are they, where would be a niche for you to play in. So you have all these products and you need a way to describe them. So you would conduct a descriptive sensory analysis. And this one requires very few people, but they have to be very highly trained. For these kinds of things, it usually a multi-month kind of affair where you you produce product-specific lexicon, you define your attributes and product definitions, and identify references for the scale. So for each of these cheeses, you would ask panelists that are highly trained the same set of questions. You'll present them with an attribute and ask them to rate that attribute from on the, some sort of numeric scale. And what you get out of it at the end of the day, so again, you pre-screen people, make sure they're good, you train them, and then you evaluate products. And what you get out of that is these kinds of spider plots. So each cheese sample in the way will get their separate identity. And if you have done this many, many times and you know your product category, some people will be able to kind of recognize the shape of what their product should look like and how is the new product that they produced or whatever is different from the shape of the product that they need to manufacture. Another way to look at the data is to look at it holistically. So not just at each of these particular samples separately, but combine the whole data set and look at it from kind of a bird's eye view. So this is an example from our cheese panel from a couple of years ago. We profiled a whole bunch of different cheeses, and this is just looking at their texture descriptors. And what we found is that this is a PCA or principal component analysis plot where you try to reduce the data set to two main dimensions. And the first dimension here is sort of the hardness. So the harder the cheeses are in the lower right corner, the softer cheeses would be in the lower left corner. Then your dimension 2 is cheeses that are more adhesive will stick to your teeth in the top, and more springy, the ones that are less adhesive at the bottom. So when you look at this map, what you can see is that all the cheddars are sort of clustered together, and you see them in the center top of this map. All the Munsters tend to be in the bottom left corner where they are identified as more softer and springier and more moister cheeses. And the cheddars, in contrast, tend to be a little more harder and a little bit more adhesive. And the Swiss cheeses, most of the 4 of them are, as you see, they're harder, but they're also very springy. So they're at the bottom right of the map. Now, if you see here among the cheddars, there's a Havarti there, so the red one. So what happened there was that Havarti. So when you see this map, you kind of look at it and say, wow, this Havarti is very different from the other 2 Havartis, and all of a sudden it's in the cheddar texture category. So maybe you can investigate and see if there's anything was wrong with that batch, or there was something, again, ingredient, was there some sort of defect happening? Why is that Havarti in there? Or was it a mislabeled sample? And if you are in the Swiss territory, Swiss sample number 5, again, it's sort of out of its comfort zone. So there must be something different about this. Was it not aged correctly? What happened? So you can use this data, again, once you build it, you can use it to identify and help you kind of answer some of the business questions that may arise. So those are the examples of the descriptive panel results. The next one and the last one, which is my favorite, and that's what we do a lot here, because again, folks like to know whether people like their product or not. So this is an example on an affective test. So here, do people like my product? And let's say that you have, for these kinds of tests, you need really large sample sizes, meaning the large number of consumers, product users have to taste your products. You don't have to give them a full serving of the product, just to taste is enough. But again, because each one of us has our own different preferences, it's important to have a larger sample size in order to project to the larger population. And we typically serve these samples blind to folks, so they don't know, like they would know that this is a cheese or this is a yogurt, but they don't know any other information about the product. And we ask them questions like, how much do you like this product? How would you rate the flavor intensity? And sometimes we would ask them in just about right scales. So is it 2 weak or too strong of a flavor. And sometimes we ask them in the intensity, like how pleasant is this flavor? Is it not at all pleasant, or it's very pleasant? And that all of this can give you additional information about, how you can optimize the product, what are the key drivers of overall liking of your product. That is, do people really like the flavor, the texture? Is the product too salty or too sweet, or is it not sweet enough or salty enough? And what should you fix first, the sweetness or the saltiness, if it's outside of folks' liking zone? And what the example of what you would get a graph like that would say, let's say you tested 3 products, one of them was a control, and then you had 2 different prototypes that were in the pipeline, and you wanted to see, is your control, how is your new product comparing to the control? And in this case, you have a test product that's testing significantly higher, has significantly higher overall liking. So that's, of the 2 prototypes, that's the formula that you would go with. And one of the things that I do want to say is that just because the product scored really well in the blind study does not guarantee market success. But if your product tested badly in the blind test, definitely it will not do well in the marketplace. So that was the overview of kind of the methodologies, and now about our Sensory Evaluation Center and what is our mission. So we are part of Food Science Department, and our mission is trifold. We provide training and hands-on learning opportunities to students who are interested in the fields of sensory and consumer research. We do our own research. I work with Professor Robin Dando and many other faculty in the Department of Food Science and within CALS, plant sciences, etc., to, on kind of scientific research topics. And we also help businesses develop and improve their product offerings through consumer and sensory testing. And that helps, the business in New York State. And it helps the consumers because through our testing, the formulations that businesses develop are improved and optimized for their customers. So it's a win-win. And those services are the fee-based services that we provide. Robin Dando is a professor in the Department of Food Science that I work closely with. We also have Anna Catherine Mansfield. She's particularly interested in wine, so enology and wine typicity, that's kind of her areas of expertise. And from time to time, we do pull in Professor Emeritus Harry Lawless, who is very famous in the sensory field. He's one of the, I would call the godfathers in the field. His textbook is very famous if you want to Google that. And of course, myself is here as well. Our facility, it's a state-of-the-art facility, brand new. We have a great commercial kitchen with 8 sensory booths. They're ergonomically designed. They have variable lighting conditions. Sometimes we turn on the red lights to disguise the color of the samples. So again, we like to play games in sensory. We use a lot of kind of video conferencing when we're running focus groups, and the client can sit in and listen to, what people think about the product. And we can also use other facilities within stocking hall, like a dairy bar, et cetera, et cetera. The panelist pool is very diverse. Most of the folks are obviously younger. So most of the studies that we run are with people that are sometimes 25 and younger, but we do have access to all kinds of folks, and we recruit panelists that are specific for the studies, and we obviously screen them for allergies and things like that. And we routinely fill N of 100 panels, even through all the times through COVID. The services that we provide, again, as I mentioned before, so we do large-scale consumer use studies for acceptability and discrimination. Some of them are central location and some of them are home use. And with COVID, we have COVID protocols that allow us to do all the in-person central location testing in Stocking Hall. And again, we do fill those sample sizes. We have several trained panels specifically for dairy. We have a milk panel, part of Milk Quality Improvement Program. It's a program that's been in existence for more than 40 years. So we have continuously trained great panel. We did ice cream judging this year for NICRA. We're very proud of that. It's great. We had a cheese panel run from 2016 to 2018, and we hope to resurrect it at some point if we do find the customer. And we have some other panels as well. And we do some small scale qualitative studies like focus groups. Sometimes folks just want to see if, develop a concept and show their product to consumers in the focus group and get feedback. So we do that as well. As far as conducting sensory research during COVID-19, this is just an article that we published this year. And we have run a study with the same set of samples in the central location testing as a central location test. So in-person panelists came to Stocking Hall and evaluated the set of products, and we sent the same products back for them to evaluate it at home in their own homes under their home use conditions. And panelists were not aware that the products were the same. We disguised them very well. We randomized the sample, we randomized the testing conditions, and what we found was that overall the liking didn't really change depending on the test condition, whether it was in person or at home. But when panelists were tasting the same samples at home, they assigned fewer penalties. So they were less picky and were less analytical when they were at home. So again, this was a finding that was published, and this is very encouraging for our industry partners to know that even in COVID, you can conduct sensory testing safely and do find variable results there. Some of the other services that we provide is we do project consulting. Sometimes folks, they just don't know how to approach sensory or what it is, so it seems very scary. So we do provide per hour basis consulting. We also conduct training. A lot of our workshops are custom, and they can be either on site or conducted, via Zoom anywhere. And we have a lot of experience with that. As far as services specific for the dairy industry, we can provide sensory training for your team. And that is the easiest way would be to kind of prepare and ship to you defective milk kits. So with that, you get a list of attributes that you can choose up to 10 different defective milks. Your team, will prepare it for you, will ship it to your location. Your team can try it. There will be an answer key. So all of the samples will be identified what particular defect that is. There would be a control sample where you'll be able to compare the control versus each of the defects. And there's some additional information there that would help you diagnose your problem. So if you do find a defect in your own milk, you would be able to at least sort of diagnose it roughly before you can call a specialist for additional information. Sensory is a part of several of the Cornell Dairy Extension workshops that are coming up, and I listed a few here. So if you're particularly interested in any of the sensory aspects of the dairy products, whether it's milk, the ice cream, yogurt, or cheese, there is a sensory component in each of them. And you, Louise, can send you a follow-up with how, the links of how you can register for those. As I said, we do conduct and design custom workshops for specific topics and product categories that are relevant for specific business. We've done it before, we continue doing that. And we do consult. So if you want to find your own sensory capabilities, build your own sensory capabilities, we can help you develop that. We do dairy product testing, as I mentioned. Our trained milk quality panel has over 40 years of experience. It's really not, we are all young here, but the kind of institutional memory and institutional knowledge is really huge here at Cornell. We do testing for unfinished products across the shelf life, and we have added raw milk testing, because without good raw milk, there's no good finished product at the end of it. We had some descriptive sensory panels in the past, and we can develop them again. We conduct consumer acceptability testing, and in the past, again, we've conducted it for yogurts, milk, cheese, all kinds of things we've done. And we can do consumer surveys. Sometimes folks just are interested in the concept. So if I have this idea, would people like it? So we can do consumer surveys like that. And lastly, this is my information. If you're interested in anything sensory related, again, if it's just a consult and you just have a question about how to best approach it in your own organization, please feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to answer your questions now.
Thanks so much, Alina. Does anyone have any quick questions for Alina? You can either unmute yourself and ask directly, or put your question in the chat.
I tend to talk a lot, so sorry, guys.
It was great. And I'm so glad you covered how sensory can still be done during COVID with all the increase in cases currently. We're not stopping. We're moving on. We figured it out, and we're going to keep going. So for anybody who's interested, don't let that deter you from reaching out to Alina. Okay. We are just a couple of minutes over, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. Thank you so much, Alina, for your time and the great presentation on the services offered by the Cornell Sensory Evaluation Center. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our last speaker, who is Philip O. from Cornell Center for Technology Licensing. He is the Associate Director of Licensing and Business Development for Life Sciences. Phil, if you want to do a brief self-introduction beyond your title, that would be wonderful. And then we'll let you go ahead and move right into your presentation.
Sure thing. Thanks for the introduction, Nicole, and thank you all for inviting me to this party. I really appreciate it. Always happy to speak to you about our office, CTO, and what we do. I've been with the office for about 14 years, and I manage a team of licensing officers. We are the stewards of Cornell's intellectual property, and I'll get into more about what our office does and how you should think about perhaps utilizing our office. But in short, we manage everything from apples to zebras, robotics, to everything in between, including dairy-related technologies. So I'm happy to share with you a little bit more about the office. Am I able to share? Okay.
Should be able to. Yes, we can.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if I go to presentation mode. Is that coming through okay?
We are seeing your presenter view currently.
Oh, how do I stop that?
So if you go up to display settings and then, swap presenter
there we go.
View and slideshow, it should. Perfect.
All right. Thank you very much again for this opportunity. So our office, Center for Technology Licensing at Cornell University, is the technology transfer office here at Cornell. And I'll just give you a brief overview of the office, what we do, and the punchline will be how to use our service for all the participants here. So in brief, these are the two relevant people in our office for dairy-related technologies, myself and my colleague Aris Despo. There's our contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out anytime. In terms of Cornell's research, like I said, we're the stewards of Cornell's intellectual property, and in fiscal year 2020, Cornell did about 1.2 billion in research. Our office manages all the intellectual property from Ithaca to Geneva, Cornell Tech, and Weill Medical down in New York City, as well as Qatar, which is not on here. And what does the 1.2 billion in research lead to? According to Reuters, in 2019, Cornell was ranked the 9th most innovative university globally, which we're trying to improve even further. The main campuses that we receive intellectual disclosures from are Ithaca, Geneva, Cornell Tech, Weill, and Qatar. This is our website, ctl.cornell.edu. It has a tab for inventors, for industry, for entrepreneurs and investors. So if you're looking for technologies that may be relevant, or if you have a need of technologies in your company, I would check the For Industries tab and search our technologies, or even better yet, just contact me directly and I'm happy to rummage through our large portfolio to see what may be relevant. In terms of what our office does, we have a very simple mission. It's to catalyze the commercialization of technology and make sure it gets out into the public for public good. And we also have a secondary mandate, which is to foster economic development within New York State and across the country. Cornell, as you know, is both state and private. And so we have a state mandate for improving the local state economy as well. We provide 3 pillars of service in our minds: technology licensing, technology startups, and education and outreach. And I'll touch a little bit on each of those. In fiscal year 2020, to give you a sense of what we've done as an office, we had a little over 500 new invention disclosures. We had over 400 issued patents, 69 licenses and options, and we generated $20.5 million in revenues for the university. We see startups as a big engine for local and regional economic development. We did 13 startups, 8 in New York State last year. And we also launched a program called Ignite, which I'll get into a little bit, for some translational funding, something that Cornell did not have until a few years ago. So something we're really proud of. And then in terms of education and outreach, we also engage with students very closely to help them explore other career paths in addition to tenure track positions. We also focus on trying to address diversity issues, more female entrepreneurs, more female faculty engagement in this process of entrepreneurship. And we target both internal and external stakeholders. This hopefully is a graphic to show you how much Cornell has changed. To give you a bit of background, so I started in 2008, 2007, and if you look at the horizontal, that gives you the years. And the company names of startups were basically placed based on year founded. You can see there's been an explosion of new company formation here at Cornell. In 2020 alone, our investments, the investments in our startups totaled $332 million, almost a fifth of what the total startups have raised to date. And that's just a gross underestimate too, because we don't have full data sets. So there's just been an explosion of interest in entrepreneurship and new startup formation. So one point of this slide is to really let you know that it's not just technologies available through our website, but we can also put you in touch with companies that may be relevant to your space that our office can help you engage with as well and make introductions. The Ignite program is a translational funding program that's supported by the Office of the Vice President for Research and Innovation. And we basically have 3 pillars of this. One is to help move technologies, so innovation acceleration, to a next inflection point. We also help startups get to a next inflection point. And we're also working to set up a corporate partnerships model where some of the translational funding can help extend, if you will, corporate monies to go further through sponsored research programs. And the rate of return on all of this so far has been a 40-to-1 return, and hence greater investment in this program is coming from the provost. So we're very proud of this result. We're expecting greater things in the future. So why does our office exist? And why do we do what we do? So way back in the 70s, when some of you may be familiar with this whole stagflation issue and Japan taking over an America in decline issue, these 2 senators, Birch Bayh and Robert Dole, recently passed, asked the fundamental question: what's going on with all the research funding we give to universities? And what they came to realize is that the government owns all the intellectual property that they fund. And so these two senators in 1980 passed what's called the Bayh-Dole Act. And they did this to really fuel the US economy, which is what the whole purpose of taxpayer-funded research is supposed to be. And so in exchange for the fundamental change is that universities got to keep the rights to the intellectual property, no longer the federal government. And in exchange for that, there were some conditions applied, like we have to commercialize, we have to have a preference for US companies, preference for small businesses, US manufacturing, and also distribute dollars to inventors. And the government also got in exchange for this a grant to all the IP that we, a non-exclusive right to all the IP we generate, as well as margin rights, which we won't get into, but it's never been used. The impact of the Bayh-Dole has been tremendous. So The Economist in 2002 basically came out and said this is possibly the most inspired piece of legislation to be enacted in the US over the past half century. Before Bayh-Dole, less than 5% of the 30,000 patents owned by the government were ever licensed to commercial entities. There were no drugs or vaccines, and only about a dozen universities had commercial technology transfer offices. Cornell, thankfully, was one of them. We had some early successes, but you can see since the Bayh-Dole from 1996 to 2017 only, we've had impacted the gross industrial output by 1.7 trillion, 865 billion to GDP, 5.9 million in new jobs, 420,000 plus new inventions, 100,000 plus patents issued, 13,000 plus startups, and it's just been tremendous. And of course, the amount of drugs, 200 plus drugs and vaccines since the Bayh-Dole Act compared to zero prior. So the impact of the Bayh-Dole has just been tremendous. I should also note that most of the licenses that we do at the university are to startups. And so startups are a tremendous vehicle for moving technologies forward. And hence my earlier comment that get to know our startups, and our office can help you do that. In terms of what Cornell's policies and priorities are, we follow the Bayh-Dole requirements, and we also have policies that basically claim ownership from our staff and faculty. And we have the mandate to develop that for public good, New York State given first priority. And this is important to get a reasonable and fair return. We're not here to maximize profit, unlike companies, for-profit companies where that's their mandate. Ours is to get fair and reasonable. The licensing office, such as ours, also plays an important role, and an increasingly important role, in recruiting and retaining faculty and students, as more and more faculty and students have an eye towards entrepreneurship and intellectual property. We also see it as a really important tool to increase research sponsorship or corporate engagement, to put it another way, and I'll touch on that towards the end. And the last point that kind of dovetails with that, we want closer ties to industry. Hence, meeting with companies in the dairy space is really important to us, as dairy is a huge, huge area of research for Cornell. And we have a lot of technologies in this space. So if you want to know our official policies and policies, go to the website and you have some nice bedtime reading material if you're interested, have trouble falling asleep. I'll also just add that at our office, we never question the science of our faculty and staff and inventors. Cornell makes the hires and we know they're going to do great research. We just look at it from a different lens. What is the invention specifically? What market does it serve? And from a licensing perspective, what makes the most sense? What's best for the technology? The last couple of slides I'll just end with are what our relationship with companies. And so unlike perhaps years ago, where universities were seen as the ivory tower, universities are much, much more inclined to doing business with companies, Cornell included. And in fact, we see the public-private partnership as integral and critical to moving technologies forward. And so we always welcome engagement with companies. And in fact, we see companies as partners in the process and not as some distinct third-party entity. You're integral. So from that vantage point, our office is always trying to learn what your needs are and trying to dovetail your needs with the solutions that Cornell may be able to help deliver, whether it be technologies we have, or whether it be faculty who are experts in your space that could potentially help you address your specific problem. So when you think about engaging with our office, the more we understand your needs and problems, the better we'll be able to help you. And related to that point is really see our office, myself and my colleague Eris, as kind of as your eyes and ears here at Cornell, right? We can serve as a scout because we have full visibility to all the technologies that come from the Ithaca campus. And once you're on our radar and we see technologies that may be relevant for you, or new faculty hires or research projects or grants funded, we can let you know about that. The last point related to this whole partnership idea is really greater transparency and flexibility in agreements. And what I mean by that is we, with our Office of Sponsored Programs, recently launched what's called the Gateway to Partnership Program. So often when companies want to sponsor research at a university, they want greater transparency in terms of what the future licensing terms could look like. And so this is something that universities in the past, including Cornell, have been resistant to do because it can negatively impact your tax exempt status here at Cornell. But we were able to work with the Vice Provost for Research, who was very progressive minded and very corporate friendly. And we were willing to take on this risk of affecting potential tax exempt status by working with companies that fund at a certain level to get preset terms that are market favorable. So this is the first for Cornell. And so if you're thinking about engaging with any faculty members on specific research projects, go to this website, researchservices.cornell.edu/process/gateway partnership program, or just do a Google search for Gateway to Partnership at Cornell, and you'll see the link. And you can see what the requirements are if this is something that's of interest to you. But this was a big deal at Cornell to launch this program. So with that, I want to thank you for allowing me to share with you a little bit about our office, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Phil. That's really great information. When our previous webinar was highlighting some of the technologies that the dairy foods professors here in the Department of Food Science are working on. And so this is the natural progression to give folks the information on how can they engage with those technologies and what do they need to do in order to have access to those. So I really appreciate you giving all of this information. Does anyone have any questions for Phil about what CTL does, how you can sort of get on the radar for CTL in your business and what that might look like? We have a bit of a quiet group today, Phil.
Okay, no worries. It's 3:30, 4 o'clock.
It is, and it's the week before a lot of folks are starting to go on holiday break. So I totally understand.
I would just add that we're always getting new technologies, and we're always updating our website with new technologies that we get. We have what are called non-confidential summaries or technology briefs. So feel free to scour those, but don't hesitate to reach out to me, because what's on the website is not in real time, because we're getting new inventions all the time. And dairy is definitely an area where a lot of research is happening.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I would just add that, at Cornell, we have dairy, both the production and processing. And so our webinar series here has been focused on dairy foods, but a lot of the folks who have joined us throughout this series have you know, have interests both at production and processing. So this is good information for both levels.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, if there's no last minute questions for Phil or for anyone else, thank you all so much. Again, this has been recorded. This will be on our YouTube channel, and it will be sent out to the folks, all the folks who registered for this. So as every presenter has mentioned, please reach out if you have any questions. We're always happy to answer questions, connect you with the right folks, anything that you need to facilitate this, this dairy innovation in New York State. Okay, have a wonderful holiday, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.